Word and real.
Numbing hand.
Word and real.
Essence of slug. Numbing hand.
Word and real.
Essence of slug. Numbing hand.
Word and real.
Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, a podcast trapped in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. This season is the Serial Bomb Yo, and we're looking at Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. Last week we finished Buffy, live serial, but before we get to Angel's Time Bomb episode, I didn't want to be finished with Buffy just yet, so for the next few weeks I'll be checking out a different Buffy episode before going all the way back to the beginning with the Christy Swanson movie.
But today, we're talking about the episode shortly after Life Serial, specifically 2 episodes later from Season 6, Episode 7, More with Feeling, aka the musical episode, aka the best episode. And I think my guest today will agree with me, so I'd like to welcome her now. Welcome, Leandra from Rocky Horror Minute. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Certainly not going through the motions.
Yeah, so, this is your first time on here, so, I'd like to start off by asking you, what is your history with Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
So, growing up, this was one of my favorite shows. I watched it as it came out. I was obsessed with it, and I specifically remember watching this and thinking that this was just the best thing that had ever happened. And I was, of course, I was a young teen and thought that James Marsters as Spike was just absolutely it, the best. And this was uh, a great delivery system for some very good James Marsters.
Yeah, there's a reason why they kept bringing him back, and it wasn't because they had always planned to incorporate Skype, to incorporate Spike into the show. It was just absolutely based on James Marsters' performance that they just loved him so much and kept bringing him back.
And just his trajectory through the show really does speak to how good he was, and I'm guessing how fun he was to work with because uh, there's there's a lot that he brought to the table.
Yeah, and as I've been, doing this show, I didn't do a full Buffy and Angel rewatch, but I started with season 6 and I watched all of season 6 of Buffy, and then I started watched going into season 7, but I only made a few episodes in, and the beginning of season 7 is rough. So I dropped that and I switched over to season 5 of Angel. And I think that was the best decision because I'm really enjoying season 5 of Angel, especially like in the middle. There are some fantastic episodes in the middle of season 5, and Angel season 5 is great, and I'm looking forward to starting to talk about those episodes. But we are talking about season 6 in Buffy, and this is considered kind of the low point because they had just switched over from WB to UPN. So there were some struggles there, and Joss Whedon was stretched kind of thin because he was doing Buffy and Angel and Firefly all at the same time. So this suffered, but he managed to create this episode once more with feeling. And this is someone who Joss Whedon had never written music before, and he managed to write an entire episode full of like 15 songs, I think, and they are all fantastic.
Absolutely. And just knowing that this was a first go for him, I think makes it even better. There are a couple of things that I think somebody with a little bit more experience would have done slightly differently. But this was very, very good, and definitely as a teen, I had no complaints. Well, I had a couple of complaints. We'll talk about those though.
Do you remember whenever this episode first came out? It's like, do you remember your reaction hearing that, Buffy was coming out with a musical episode? Because in a lot of ways, in a lot of shows, doing a musical episode would feel like, okay, this is where they jumped the shark.
So I was still at an age where I just took it as, ooh, they're doing a musical. That's great. Now anytime I hear that that's going to happen, I kind of go at it with a very kind of restrained reaction because I know that they're generally not going to be good. And this really set too high a bar.
Yeah, I looked around. I found one or two like, ranking the best musical episodes from shows that aren't typically musical in nature. And I think everything puts this one as number one. And
Absolutely.
and there's a reason for that. And one other thing that I'm going to mention before we start getting to the episode proper is I think it's funny because whenever I just did a Google search of Once More with Feeling, without anything else added to it, the first thing that came up was a 1979 song by Chris Christopherson, the actor. And I wouldn't normally mention it, but it came up with the lyrics. And the first line is, "We're just going through the motions." And I just thought, I wonder if that is like had any sort of influence on Joss Whedon at all whenever he was writing this, because I feel like that's too much of a coincidence.
I I have to agree with you. There's no way. Well, I mean, it's possible that he wasn't aware of it, but I do find it hard to believe. And uh, maybe it was kind of something that he had heard and it stuck in his head, and he went, you know what? I think I have something here.
Yeah, and I will also say that, a lot of times musical episodes, the songs chosen are, they fit with the characters, but sometimes they're kind of forced in. But for this episode specifically, like with each episode written for the episode, it just really it builds everybody's character and it moves the plot forward, but it's also a good song, and that is an almost impossible feat to pull off, I think.
For sure. A lot of the time when they do musical episodes, it tends to be like a jukebox sort of experience.
Hmm.
Like I know Riverdale that generally does like one musical episode a season. I don't even know if it's still on, but I digress. Um, but they just kind of shoehorn the music in, and you go, oh, it's kind of pushing the plot forward. Sure, we'll go with that. But with this, they put a lot of time and effort into this, and clearly brought in some coaches for maybe some of the actors that aren't as strong with their singing.
Yeah, I was looking it up, and yeah, they talk about, especially with Sarah Michelle Gellar, she talks about how this time was very hellish for her, and she's glad that she actually went through it and that she accomplished it, but she never wants to do it again.
Yes,
And so, yeah, that every actor that sings in this episode, it actually is their voice. Although there are some um, rumors that some of them are touched up with a little auto tune, but it's not like Cher auto tune where it's obvious auto tune. It's just some pitch correcting to make them sound better, and I think that's forgivable.
I
And
think so.
and I never noticed it, and I think Allison Hannigan is the one because she is always pointed out as the one with the weakest singing voice and the one that least wanted to do it and like begged for her and Michelle Trachtenberg begged for the fewest amount of singing lines. And then I think later she said, oh, if she had known, like not exactly, but she basically said, oh, if I'd have known about auto tune, I might have been more willing to go along with it. But let's go ahead and start out with, go through each of these songs here and start out with Going Through the Motions. So what's your thoughts on this song with her with her fighting the vampires and the one demon?
I thought that this one was particularly clever. Um, it it really did feel like it made sense that she'd be singing through this, and the lyrics themselves, I think, are some of the better ones in this episode. Like the "How can I repay whatever" kind of piece of it, I thought was just very crafty, and I didn't think that there was anything in this song that made me go, "Oh, this is not going to be a good experience."
Yeah, I think it's fun. It really sets the tone. It has that, a very jaunty, like not a I wouldn't exactly call it like a Disney vibe, even though I did read that Joss Whedon mentions that he did want this to be his like Disney-esque introductory, like part of your world kind of inspired song.
Yeah. And it even has like a small amount of exposition in it, but not in a way that I think is detrimental to kind of the the musical experience. I that I really enjoyed the hokey kind of prospector arm dance choreo of the vampires and the demon. Like that was the part that made me go, "Oh, this is going to be a good night."
Yeah, that what this really does is it does a good job, and I think Joss Whedon always does this in all his shows. He does a good job of mixing the seriousness with the humor. And I do think that the humor moments are always some of my favorite moments. Like I love, the lines, she's not even half the girl she, ow. And then if you were going to like score this one out of 10, what would you give Going Through the Motions?
I think this is a solid opener, and I'd give it like an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I'm right along there with you. I think I would give it like a 7 out of 10. It's not one that tends to get stuck in my head. It's mainly just like the joke line, like the ow or the how can I repay whatever, or let's see, the other one, she ain't got that swing, thanks for noticing.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the lines that stick out to me. And then I do think that it's a little bit over the top watching it back, but I do kind of love it that there's two moments that are repeated, like every time that she dusts a vampire, and then she goes into a longer extended note. Um, and including the end whenever she's like, I just want to feel alive, and she's like singing into a cloud of vampire dust.
And it's sparklier for this episode, which I thought was a nice touch. This is of course pre-Twilight, so
Yeah,
we didn't know that vampires could sparkle.
right. And so then we go on to the next song, the I've Got a Theory, with, and if we're together, with the little bunnies rock song in the middle. And I love the bunnies part. And another bit of trivia that I read was that um, Emma Caulfield was one of the people that they were surprised that she had such a good singing voice.
And one of the things that I quote the most from this episode is, "I've got a theory, it could be bunnies." And the longer the longer the time is since this has been released, the fewer people get this reference, and it has not stopped me. It just makes me have to go, it's from Buffy the musical. They had an episode that's it's fine. I'm funny.
Yeah, and I love, there's so much good stuff in here again, and it has uh, great little moments, especially with it beginning with Giles saying that I've got a theory that it's a demon, a dancing demon. No, something isn't right here, when it absolutely is just a dancing demon.
Yeah. I uh, Going into this song, I love the reveal of, did anyone else break into song last night? Like, um, the kind of self-awareness of going, okay, we have to explain why they're singing. It's that this isn't a universe where music normally happens.
Yeah, it's almost, it's like not quite a fourth wall break. It's like hanging a hat on it, because they break out into song and then move on like if as if everything's normal until Buffy points out, yeah, did anybody else break into song? And then everybody else is like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. That is another just little moment, and something um, that Joss Whedon does so well. I feel like I'm talking like I'm heaping a lot of praise on Joss Whedon, even though, especially I think this year, especially there's all that ickiness surrounding him. But I do have to give him credit where credit is due, and I'm not gonna get into the Joss Whedon ickiness right now, but he does do some fantastic work, and I do want to give praise to, it's not just him. He has a lot of other people in his team and on the Buffy team that have went on to create this show and this episode. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think that it's fine to separate the man from the work. So
hmm I just had to take a moment just because I felt like I was saying his name an awful lot.
I understand. And kind of going into this, I was like, I mean, my opinions have clearly changed over the years, but this is a an episode that I do genuinely love, and nothing can change that.
Yeah, and I said it from the start. I feel like this is one of the best Buffy episodes, if not the best Buffy episode.
I tend to agree with you.
And then, this is the one where we get everybody singing, and this is also where we get the most of Allison Hannigan's singing. She does have a few lines, and I never really paid much attention until I think this watching, and I could hear her shakiness compared to the rest of them, and I could, coming in with the knowledge that she least wanted to sing, I could feel that nervousness and hesitation in her lines in this.
And thinking of kind of where she was in her career, this could have been something where if they had really leaned heavily on her, it could have been something that was like detrimental to where she wanted to be. So I can understand why she wanted as little as possible to happen in this, but what they were able to bring out was, I think, really really good. And this is uh, the song where you get the kind of best of her.
Yeah, and we get some Nicholas Brendan singing here as well, and I think he has one of the best lines, and it's also just so perfect with Xander's personality. Whenever he's like, it could be witches, some evil witches, and then he has the very fast line, which is ridiculous because witches, they were persecuted, wicked, good, and love and earth and women power, and I'll be over here.
Bump bump bump.
Yeah, and we get the fabulous rock opera cut to bunnies and the fireworks and everything.
It really was just this mega rock star aside that I think also works well with the character who, yes, she's a demon, but she's also just like slightly out of phase with everybody else,
hmm
and she gets carried away.
Yeah, and I do have to mention her outfit, because everybody else is wearing fairly normal clothes, but Anya is wearing this blouse with a rhinestone butterfly on the front, and it's black, and it's like a triangle shape that's like cut on, you see her sides. It's the weirdest thing, but it works for her character because it is kind of so weird, but it's also sexy, and it fits her personality pretty well.
I think the other person who has a very memorable costume for me is Amber Benson. Um, Tara is wearing just a full-on like Renaissance corset, and
Yes.
nobody talks about it. Nobody's like,
Mhm.
"That's weird." They went, "Okay, well, that's clearly what's the vibe for this." So,
Yeah, and I will say that the one weird thing that I think is worth mentioning is Buffy does toss in the line that, hey, I've died twice. And I feel like that line, throwing it in here, and the fact that whenever she sings that, then it cuts to Giles, and he has just this bright smile on his face as he's saying that. That kind of feels like it's very brief, but it feels like a disconnect from where they are with her death in this season.
and I think that there's going to be a lot of payoff with that too by the end of the episode. Just the fact that Giles is going through his own journey of like trying to figure out where he went wrong with Buffy and getting it so wrong. Like
Mhm.
I think of his kind of smiling at the "I died twice" and all of that as him going, "Yeah, and we saved you from that."
So that's the second song. So let's go ahead and rate this one out of 10. What would you give this whole section? If you want to, you're fine if you want to score the bunnies part separately or give it all together. Either way.
Um, I would say as a unit, this kind of three-song medley um, is a little bit weaker for me than the opener. Um, I think on average, I'd give it a 6 or a 7, just because I think that there there were some high points, but there are definitely points that I think kind of have aged a little poorly. Um, that being said, I think Anthony Stewart Head really brings his musical theater gravitas to this, and just the extensive background. He's the one that gets the counter melody in it.
Hmm.
Overall, still a really great song. I'll go with a 7.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think I would score it overall like a 6, but I would give the bunny section in the middle a 9.
That's fair.
And then after this, we get the brief moments is of them asking, is it just us or is it happening to everybody? And Buffy looks out the door, and this is my personal favorite moment of the entire episode. Just and it's funny too because I mentioned that I was going through Angel season 5. I was actually right in the middle of Smile Time, and I had just finished the part where the Jim Henson character talks to Angel, to Puppet Angel, and the guy playing the Jim Henson style character is the same guy that's the mustard guy.
That's great. That
Yeah,
really is just delightful.
and anytime I think of this episode randomly, the first line that pops to my head is "They got the mustard out." And this is the most, uh, 50s era musical choreography moment. And it's just for this like 20-second scene. And it's just so fantastic that they just go all out with this big choreography number for a throwaway character.
I think that this and the other kind of throwaway scene are the things that are the most successful with making this a standout episode. So,
Yeah, because it's not, it really helps sell the fact that it's not just the Scooby Gang that's that's in this. It really is the entire town of Sunnydale that's trapped in this musical theater episode.
And I do feel bad for the people who aren't in the Scooby Gang because they're just like, wow, I guess I'm singing now. That's that's weird. I
Yeah,
don't know
it's
how I'm
like
gonna fix this.
yeah, it's like, everybody else just had like 2 or 3 days of bursting into song and dance, and then it just goes away, and they just go about with the rest of their lives, and nothing else happens.
I like that Dawn, her experience is this all happened in math class, and we were really excited about it. And I feel like the musical theater kids were probably just living their best lives.
Absolutely. And so the next one I think is another one of the more infamous ones, the Under Your Spell. This is Amber Benson's choice to shine because she's another actress that had a musical background, and I think they really leaned into that by giving her this solo number.
Yeah, and she is a very talented singer. I I do not like this song. Um, I, I yeah, I thought that this was a little overt, and
A little.
um, yeah, there's a lot about it that I think was heavy-handed.
hmm Yeah, because this is really, in terms of the plot line, I think um, this is almost like skipped over, but it really does have important plot in terms of the Tara and Willow relationship, because this is shortly after or shortly before she realized that Willow put this forgetting spell on her. Because I think not here at the moment, but a little bit later, she's wearing the flower that she found under her pillow, that where Willow cast a spell on her to make her forget the fight that they had the day before about Willow using too much magic.
I like that they took the opportunity to spend time kind of showing that this was a good relationship and that Willow and Tara are uh, a good couple.
hmm
But
And it's also worth mentioning that they were the first like real lesbian couple on TV. They've had, gay moment, like a gay kiss, but this is the first like long-term gay relationship on TV.
definitely in a primetime slot. Like obviously the there's Queer as Folk, which came out a little before this, I want to say. But this is the first exposure that I think most people had to a non kind of heteronormative normative relationship on uh, on just like their 7 p.m. slot on TV, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, and of course they end with the most sexually explicit moment with them, going from dancing into the park into the bedroom, and Tara like suddenly like looks, has a downward look, and then Willow basically goes down on her, and she says, "I can feel you inside," and
And saying
spread
you make me complete.
yeah, and
Ugh,
spread beneath my willow tree. It's
ugh.
like, and the fact that she's like levitating is Willow is just off screen, and she's like, leaning her head back in ecstasy. It's as avert as you can be without being like primetime explicit, without having to censor something.
And I I am very, very, very happy that this relationship occurred on Buffy. I'm very, very, very happy that they had a song. I just don't want it to be this song. The song sucks.
All right. Well, speaking of that, let's go ahead and score this song out of 10. And I think I'll go first. And I agree with you. I think Amber Benson has a great voice, but I think overall the pitch is a little bit too high for what I like to listen to for an entire song.
Hmm.
And just the fact that it is kind of a sappy love song, and it feels more plot based than catchy. And this is not a song that ever really gets stuck in my head as I'm thinking about this episode. So I would give this like a 4. Like it's not ear grating to me, but it's not that great. So how about you? What do you give it?
I think a 4 is right where it needs to be. Um, I I don't think anything goes anything lower than a 4 in this episode, at least in my opinion. But this is a low point for me. Um, as an aside, I thought that it was great that they had Amber Benson and Anthony Stewart Head right around this time uh, go on VH1 to celebrate the uh, the anniversary of the Rocky Horror Picture Show being released, and it was Anthony Stewart Head reprising his role as Frankenfurter, and it was Amber Benson singing "Touch Me" or Touch Me" from Rocky as Janet, just wearing like the bra and the slip, and I remember watching that as a teen, going, "What? No, no, stop!"
Yeah, even though I do think it's not that surprising, but I was a little surprised whenever I found out that Anthony had did have a run as Frankenfurter in the Rocky Horror Show.
And because I found that out after I had spent all of this time watching him as Giles, I was like, put some pants on, Dad, you're drunk.
Yeah, I also like him in. I haven't seen the whole movie, but I've seen large chunks of it, and Repo the Genetic Opera.
Oh, so good. He really was a delight in that.
So the next brief moment, we do have a little bit of the demon moment, the hint of the demon as somebody tap dances and bursts into flame. And I think that's just a nice little moment, and it's very short and brief, and it kind of gives us the stakes of this episode to let us know that it's not just all fun and games. There is a demon behind this, and there is death involved.
In my notes I have, what's wrong with a little dancing? You'll die, that's what.
And then we get the I'll never tell with the Xander and Anya in their nighttime outfits. Which we go from the the sexually overt under your spell straight into Emma Caulfield in a bra and a slip.
And of course Xander is dressed in like this somewhat oversized um, blue silky pajama set too, and the that it's almost like they're playing a more traditional like I Love Lucy era um, like household couple
Yeah, and
than
this does feel like and I believe he said that it was inspired by like the 50s era musicals, like the Gene Kelly style.
for
Uh,
sure.
was what he's going for, and we do get like they don't have the separate beds pushed together. They don't quite go that far, but yeah, that's his silk night robe. It does feel like a 50s aesthetic, and so does I think Emma Caulfield's hair does feel very 50s, even though the bra and the slip, it feels a little like it still feels retro, but just the fact that how much skin is showing feels like a more modern sensibility.
For sure. This was that this was a really fun song for me because um, I you'd already said that people were surprised by what Emma Caulfield could bring to the table. This was some really strong dancing from her too. Like I already liked her voice from Bunnies, but this was I think proof that she's probably in the I'd say top 3 singers or at least performers in the cast.
Hmm. And this does have, that I think there's probably at least three musical lines that I think of whenever I think of this episode. The first one is I got the mustard out. The second one is his penis got diseases from a Shumash tribe.
I like the his eyes are beady. This is my bridge, hello, or this is my verse, hello.
Yes, I love that too. And then she just immediately starts, look at me, I'm dancing crazy. And just and that does feel like a very Anya thing to do, to just steal the focus, like, look at me, I'm Anya.
She's older than everybody, but in a very real sense, she's like the most immature.
Yeah, and I don't remember, but I think it's interesting that's the fact that Xander actually calls them out uh, as being the Scoobies. Because I
Yeah,
know that in fandom they're always referred to as the Scoobies, but I can't remember how many times actually within the episodes that they called themselves the Scoobies.
I know that it happens a fair amount, but in this song, I like that that it is one of the moments when Xander is about to say something that goes a little racy, and instead it's um, it's kind of the barbershop um, quartet thing of like instead of bucket of it's bucket of shaving cream. So it's the cutest of the Scoobies with the firm yet supple
With
tight
your lips as red as
embrace.
rubies and the firm yet supple tight embrace.
Yeah,
So yeah, you can tell that he's setting up the rhyme for boobies,
yeah,
which I think it's like doubly funny because I think next to breasts, boobies would be the least offensive term to use.
absolutely. Like, there's no censor who would go, no, you can't say boobies.
I mean, I do think sometimes censors take context and you can say boobies, but you can't necessarily talk about grabbing boobies.
That's fair. But at least in this, the fact that they're very much going for the no, we're doing the musical thing, where we don't actually say anything naughty.
Hmm. And again, this does have like plot development in it because this goes into the storyline with Xander and Anya's upcoming marriage and how Xander is, eventually bails on the marriage.
Yeah, this is we know now that this song is a portent of that really kind of depressing stuff that's going to show up later in the series. At the time, it I don't think that anybody thought of it more than it just being a character development sort of piece.
Hmm. Yeah, it just feels like cold feet, and people in a relationship, they tend to overlook the negatives and focus on the positives, and you don't talk about the things that you don't like about the other person, but at the same time, it's like relationships need to have communication, the good and the bad, because if you don't talk about the bad, you'll never fix it or understand.
Yeah.
And and that ends with them like both falling into this corner chair laughing, like, oh my gosh, that was so fun. And then quick cut to the next scene with them talking to Giles and saying, this is horrible, this needs to stop.
Yeah. And the laughter I think is a reference to in Singing in the Rain at the end of the song Good Morning. I want to say that they kind of do a similar thing where they collapse into giggles. So that's a nice little nod to the source reference.
Oh, I think it's funny that you mentioned that because I can't. It's been forever since I've seen Singing in the Rain, but I'm pretty sure I was just singing Good Morning from Singing in the Rain to my daughter this morning as I got her up.
Aw,
Yeah, she is a little over 1 year old right now, and you may or may not be able to hear her squeaking in the other room.
She's very excited.
Yes. So let's rate I'll Never Tell. Let's start with you. What do you give I'll Never Tell out of 10?
Um, as a standalone, it might not be super high, but within the episode itself, I think it gets an 8 or a 9 for me. This is really strong and has a lot of fun stuff in it.
Yeah, I think I'm curious if we're ever going to disagree because once again, I'm right there with you. I would never listen to this song without the visuals, but in the context of the episode and just uh, Nicholas Brennan and Emma Caulfield, they their performance really makes this song, and so like bundled together within the episode, definitely I give it an eight. An eight. I think the song by itself, if I was listening to it separately, I'd only give it like a six, but the whole thing together, definitely an eight.
Yeah, absolutely. Right around a 5 or 6 for me, if without the visuals, just on its own, because Nicholas Brennan isn't a very strong singer, and while Emma Caulfield is better than anticipated, she's still not um, like wow. So
Hmm.
I can agree with you.
Yes. And then the next moment is this again, it's like it's weird that they throw in this single take tracking shot of this conversation that goes through all this, like so much stuff happening in the background, and then we get the second uh, just random person, the woman singing about her parking tickets, and it's also worth mentioning that that the guy and her the this is Marty Noxon, I believe, singing about the parking ticket. They're both writers on the show. I believe writers. I know that
Oh,
they're maybe produced executive. They're, I mean, they're. I should, I could just easily Google this, but um, it's more fun this way. I
it's fair.
think.
They're on the staff.
Yes, they are prominent members of the Buffy staff behind the scenes. I believe they're writers, but I'm not 100% sure. And she has this nice little, um, you know, soulful song about uh, getting a parking ticket and thinking that the hydrant wasn't there, and then we have these um, the vampire, the actors that played the vampires and the demon are now dressed in like street sweeper outfits and doing a very similar dance in the background.
I didn't clock that they were the same actors. That's amazing. And it's very theatrical for that
Hmm.
to be a thing.
And they're also, I'm not sure if all of them, but they're also the Sweets minions.
Oh, that's great. That
Hmm.
really is fun.
Yeah.
This is in this same kind of walkthrough scene. Uh, I want to say that this is when Giles um, references the fact that the police took all of these witness statements, but he doesn't say statements. He says witness arias, which I think is just delightful.
That's great. I didn't catch them. Yeah, I didn't catch that. I know that there was a couple other like little moments like that in the background that I noticed, but I can't remember today because I didn't write them down.
It really is a fun episode to sit and watch the itty bitty bits.
Mhm. And then we get into James Marsters' song "Rest in Peace," and this is my wife's favorite song of the episode.
Same, very much same. Um, I I remember as a kid, and by kid I mean teen, but as a child, I thought that this was just the best. This was right around the time when downloading music on the internet was a thing, and I definitely downloaded this from LimeWire. don't tell anyone. But Rest in Peace was definitely a song that I just listened to outside of this episode fairly frequently. And it I'm not sure that it is as good as I thought it was when I had a crush on James Marsters. Uh, Shocking, I know, but uh, there there is a lot of really good stuff that happens in this to forward the plot. But just kind of as a Spike declaration of you're mean to me and I like you and that's mean, so leave me alone, was very gratifying.
Yeah, this again, like I said, the plot base, this really pushes forward Spike's plot line because it's at this point in time he has this obsession with the Slayer. It's not love because he at this point, he's a demon, and it is just this obsession with the Slayer. And it's something that he thinks it's love, but I I do think that it makes more sense to call it an obsession in terms of where, especially like where the plot line goes in this. And it's not until he gets a soul in the next season that I think it starts resembling something much closer to love.
For sure. I don't think that teenage Leandra would agree with you. I think that she'd be crying right now. But uh, but no, you're absolutely right that this is almost a chemical attraction based thing instead of it being like love.
Mhm. And I do think that in this is I want to say one of the only songs. I mean, I there might be a couple later songs, but this doesn't really have any humor mixed into it. It really is just this hard driving rock song that really stays with Spike and his feelings throughout. And I think my favorite line in this is, if my heart could beat, it would break my chest. And
But I can see you're not impressed.
yes,
Yeah.
I think really the only bit of humor bit comes at the end whenever, they both fall into the open grave with Buffy on top, and then she leaves after the song is over and runs away, and Spike pops up and he's like and says, "So you're not staying then?"
And that very much is a good Spike moment, good not just for the uh, the character and the plot within the series, but it's also a very good musical moment of um, kind of the juxtaposition of I need you to leave me alone, let me rest in peace. No, wait, come back.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning. I'm pretty sure I read that James Marsters played the guitar in this too.
That makes sense.
Hmm. So let's go ahead and rate this song. I think I'll go first this time. Uh, I, I I enjoy it a lot. Like I think it's a great song, but it's just not quite my style. I can't put my finger on it, but there's just something about it that doesn't fully gel with me. But I can't deny that it's not great, and it is one of those that gets stuck in my head, I think, more than some of the other ones. Like I was trying to remember the Giles song, but this song is the one that kept popping into my head instead of the Giles song. So I would give this an 8.
So high school uh, high school Leandra would give this an 11 out of 10 and shriek that anybody who thought otherwise was simply wrong. Um, but re-listening to it, I there are things that I don't love about it. James Marsters, of course, isn't British and is using this accent, and you hear him in this song using a British accent while singing, and that's clearly not as as comfy for him as as the talking part of it. So you get a couple of slips. I think that um, it's also a little bit um, the musicality of it's a little bit weak. So I I will I think I'm gonna agree with you again and give it an 8 out of 10.
All right, fair enough. And so after this, do we get what appears to be the start of a Dawn song, and we we reveal it goes into Dawn's kleptomania at this point in the season, which I also think is a poor choice for her character. And she starts to go into a very angsty song about, does anybody even notice? Does anybody even care? And then she gets cut off by being kidnapped by one of Sweet's henchmen, which I do love the look of them because they're basically wearing like a ventriloquist dummy mask, even though it doesn't necessarily make sense. Well, I guess it does now that I step back and think about it, because really everyone in the town is being puppeted by this dummy, and like he's kind of manipulating them to sing and dance. So
Yeah,
I guess that does make sense.
I right before this, Dawn is talking with Tara and says something like, "Every time you guys fight, it makes my tummy all rumbly,"
It
and I just nothing
makes her
nothing is
feel 10 instead of 15.
yeah, and like there's nothing that compares to the hatred that a teen can have for another teen. And I truly hated Michelle Trachtenberg and the Dawn character. Like everything about her existence just angered me. I was like, oh, she sucks. Why is she here? She doesn't even go here. So just everything about this made me go, ugh. What is the reason for your existence?
Yeah. And instead of getting a singing number, she instead gets a dancing number, which and hopefully this will be the last time I talk about it, but I do think it's interesting, like how accommodating the show is in this point for the two actors that they basically requested not to give them a singing part, and they agreed by limiting Willow's lines and giving Dawn a dance number instead of a singing number. And
And
I think that's nice. And I do think that this it's referred to as Dawn's ballet, and I think this is a nice little reprieve.
it is. And I remember kind of cruelly thinking as a when I was first watching this as a kid, like, oh, finally something that Michelle Trachtenberg can do, like because she is a very accomplished, if not dancer, at least really strong movement,
Mhm.
and uh, and she does a really good job in this ballet.
Yeah, and I think it looks great, but there's not really too much to talk about it. It's just a ballet and it's nice, and then it's right afterwards it gives way to Sweet Song What You Feel, which I think that is more interesting, and I think that this is somebody that I am going to look up because I don't remember the name of the actor that plays Sweet, because he is
That
fantastic.
is Hinton Battle.
Yes. This is a new character, and he's wearing like a zoot suit, and he changes colors, and it's not quite, it's more jazzy than swing, but I love this song, and I love this character and the attitude that he brings, and the fact that he's a great dancer and singer. It's a good combination. What do you think about this song and Sweet as a character?
So this is just a really strong uh, a strong character. I think Sweet is just I don't know if they built the role for Hinton Battle in particular, but I'm just looking through his different um, his acting resume, and it really does look like they couldn't have gotten a better person for the role. He's got that strong movement. He's a great singer, has the experience in musical theater to really be able to sell what he's doing. The his bits of this song, I think, are some of the best in the episode entirely. Uh, Unfortunately, he's paired with one of the weaker singers, and that weaker singer has some of the weakest lyrics in this entire thing. The the rhyming of illegal and legal, I think, is the true low point of the entire episode, as far as like not being good and being indicative of this not being written by somebody who does musicals.
Yeah, I can see that. But yeah, I think he really just his presence and his confidence really helps make up for it. And of course, it ends with Dawn mentioning that her sister's the Slayer, and that's I like that. That's basically what ends the song, is him finding that out. And then the only thing that I do have to point out, because it's something that I notice every time I haven't looked at the picture of the actor, or um, so if it is the actor himself, then I apologize, but it felt like a slightly asymmetrical makeup, because his eyes look asymmetrical a bit, especially like with the contacts. It kind of something I noticed, and I feel like it's part of the makeup, but I could be wrong. I haven't actually seen. I forget his name already, but the actor outside of makeup.
So I'm looking at pictures of him now, and I don't I don't think that it's him, but in the character build for Sweet, they did decide that this is a character that needs to have a lazy eye, which I find so strange. Um, I don't understand why that would be a thing that they insist needs to happen. It could be that Hinton was just having a problem with the contact lenses that he has in, and that could have something to do with it. I'm not
Yeah, that was my
100% sure.
assumption. Yeah, but my assumption was that it was an issue with the makeup. And that's kind of why it throws me off a bit, because this is a show that otherwise has really good makeup, and I think like his chin piece also has a curve to it, which feels intentional, but it also adds to that asymmetry and weirdness.
Yeah, I I didn't love the prosthetic work on this character. I think that there are better ones within the Buffy universe. Um, I actually would have preferred if Hinton Battle could have had maybe a little bit less going on with his face, um, so that we could spend more time kind of looking at the way that he's developing the character. But it's not awful.
Yeah, either that, or I almost feel like they should have leaned more into like the traditional devil character, like the red demon looking devil. It's because his character does remind me, which I don't remember the timing, if this came out before or after or at about the same time, but the robot devil from Futurama, from their
Oh
musical
yeah.
episode. He has a similar style, and even the song has a similar style to it, I feel like.
I think that this came out before that, but I I know exactly what you mean.
Mhm. So why don't you go ahead and rate what you feel out of 10?
So if you take out Dawn from this, I'd say it's a 9 out of 10. Since you can't do that, I think that it gets Probably a 7 out of 10. She really does do that little for me.
Yeah, I'm not quite that far against Dawn, but I do agree that the sweet lines are much better than the Dawn lines. But overall, I would give it an 8 out of 10.
Definitely fair.
All right, and then this brings us to Giles's song, Standing. And this is, again, it's another plot-based song because this goes into Giles's character because, he's about to leave because he feels like he's standing in the way of her progress and that he's like a crutch that Buffy is leaning on too much at this point in her life. And I feel like that is absolutely accurate too. I think it's a good character choice for Giles. What do you think?
I enjoy this song. I like that it's a nice subversion of training montages. This is a song that when I listen to it, I really enjoy it, and then as soon as it's done, it just gets deleted from my brain. I can't keep it in my head. It's so forgettable,
Oh my
and I think that's
goodness.
just such a shame.
I I mentioned it a little bit whenever we were talking about the Spike song because I mentioned that every time that I was trying to think of the lines of this song, the lines from that song would pop into my head instead. It's so bizarre just how on the same wavelength we are with this episode, and I'm loving it. But Anthony Head has such an amazing voice. I wish he got a better song.
Yeah, this song is just um, very, very much filler,
Hmm.
and it shouldn't be.
I think that this song's mostly filler. I mean, it is, like I said, it is plot important, and I am kind of with you. I do kind of like the slight turn on the training montage by having Buffy be slow motion the entire time. But again, I do think that detracts from the overall memorable memorality. It makes the song less memorable.
Yeah. So, out of 10, what would you give this?
Oh, I want to score this so much higher, but just the fact that I can never remember it unless I'm like watching it or looking at the lyrics, I feel like I have to give it like a 7.
I I think that if you ask me while it's on, I'll go, yeah, well, I'll go, yeah, this is like an 8. This is really good. It's very pretty. It has a lot going for it. But then as soon
Yeah,
as it's
and
over, it
Anthony
goes,
Head's singing voice is just fantastic. Like
yeah.
I can't say enough about that.
But as far as keeping me engaged, it doesn't. So I think that this goes down to a 6 or a 7 for me as well.
Yeah, and I also love how it ends with bringing in Tara and bringing in her song, and I feel like the two of their songs together, they're both in the same headspace, and I feel like they really match the two songs very well. And again, like the end moment with the two singing together, but like singing their own, and then both combining with the "Wish I Could Stay," because again, this plays into their characters so well with Amber or with Tara feeling like it's time for her to leave her relationship and Giles wanting to go back to England.
Yeah. It I think that this is an episode and a musical where they don't do a lot of singing in harmony, um, but when they do, it's to great effect.
Mm.
And the use of counter melody, I think, is used even slightly more, and they only give it to the good singers.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that watching it again this time because having the two best singers singing together, I think is one of the best musical moments in this episode.
And it's just such a shame that I can't remember it.
Yes. All right, so we're getting close to the end. So walk through the fire. This is another one of the big In a parody sense, this reminds me a lot of Not Another Teen Movie, uh, about everybody singing about the prom tonight.
This is the big number that in a musical typically goes like right before intermission, where everybody's at a high point, and it reminds me of like Les Mis or um, just any of the big like huge ensemble sorts of um, sorts of musicals. And
Yeah, the reference that I saw in the trivia was I forget the song, but West Side Story.
oh yeah, the one about having a rumble,
Yeah,
the yeah. And I think this is my favorite song in the episode. It I think has the most moving parts in a way that is well executed and also aware of the silliness of it.
yeah. They bring back beady eyes.
Yeah,
Anya saying beady eyes is right.
there are there are a couple of points in this that I think are um, not as strong, something that you would definitely understand in a non-musical show. Like there's a line that's too low for Anthony Stewart Head. It's the too far gone to care. It's um it's hitting his like very bottom of his vocal register, and I think that that's a shame. Um, he that they really should have just figured out a way to get him to uh, sing the notes that work best for him.
Yeah, but for me, I feel like this is kind of where I tune out of the episode. Not necessarily in a bad way, but I feel like this is kind of where I'm ready for the episode to finish. I'm still enjoying it, but I feel like this for me is one that I don't tend to remember as well, just because it is, everybody gets their own part, which is great, but that also makes it less memorable, I think. It has an important purpose to the episode, and I feel like musically it's great. And and it has, my third favorite line of the episode is Willow's, um this
One
line
of
is
these
mostly
songs
filler.
mostly filler.
Yeah. That is the third line. And I did notice where I saw it in the trivia, whenever they're all walking towards camera and they say burn and the two fire trucks go by in like on beat. And Joss Whedon mentioned that that's like his the part of the episode that he was most proud of, I think, or something to that effect. And I have always noticed it, but like paying attention to it, I was like, yeah, that really is incredibly well done.
Yeah, I within the episode, definitely my favorite. I don't think that this is a song that I normally would listen to outside of the episode though.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and score this one. I think I'll go ahead and go first again. It's it's not bad, but again, it's not memorable. And like I said, this is kind of where I tune out. So I think I'm gonna give it a 7.
I think that's fair. Um, I'm going to be very generous to it, uh, and within the episode, I think it gets a 9 out of 10. This is a a really strong and complicated song,
Mhm.
and everybody's really putting their best work out there.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, and I think that's definitely one way to look at it. So the next one is really the last major song, and that's Something to Sing About. And this again is really where there's this big character reveal, because this is the song where Buffy reveals to the rest of the Scoobies that they didn't pull her out of some hell dimension while she was dead. They pulled her out of heaven. And I think that that is really just an incredibly strong moment. Like that is the moment of this episode, in my opinion. And just the way that they show that with them cutting back and forth between her and Willow, and Allison Hannigan just gives a great facial performance. Like you can see just the shock and horror on her face as she realized that what they've done, and specifically what she's done, that it is fantastic.
It really is. I I I know that we as the audience, we were already aware of that, but uh, just watching Sarah Michelle Gellar um, say this, and then watching all of these actors go, "Oh no, we have misinterpreted what's wrong and why it's wrong for weeks."
Mm-hmm.
It's so good to watch. Um, I I love that bit. I don't love um, Sarah Michelle Gellar. I don't think is a strong mover, and you can see the moments when they they kind of said, just flip your hair forward, and maybe we can get a body double in for some of these
Get
bits.
get your fight double. You're she's
Yeah,
better with choreography. Just fight choreography is just like dance choreography, right?
yeah. So it was a great moment for that person, but not Sarah Michelle Gellar.
And I think this also has just a great humor beat. Whenever she's singing at the beginning, and all the Scoobies come in, and Jaw's like, she needs backup, Anya, Tara, and then they're backup dancers.
Yeah. I don't think that that Joss Whedon kind of in general does as good a job with having backup singers for Buffy in this, but I do appreciate kind of what's going on within it.
Yeah, and I also there's something about the fact that she never definitively says that she's in heaven. I appreciate the fact that they always throw in that little uncertainty, because she says that because I've been expelled from heaven, but then she immediately undercuts that with, I think I was in heaven.
Yeah. And I want to say it's later in the series, there that and this ongoing question as to whether or not the universe that we're aware of is the real universe, or if it's just a dream of Buffy's. And and they talk about how she had this entire summer where she was awake, um, in this other universe where she's just insane.
Yeah. Yeah, that is an out there episode.
Yes.
Um, and then in this song, Spike is the one that comes in to rescue her from spinning to death, and he gets his one little verse by telling them that between the two of them, she's the one that has to go on living because she's the one that's alive.
And then Dawn ruins it. Ruins it, I tell you. With the hardest thing in this world is to live in it.
Well,
Like every single
I
line
didn't
that she
double check.
says makes it easy for me to hate her.
I didn't double check, but I read that that they actually pulled that line. I think I read that was the line that Buffy said to Dawn right before Buffy sacrificed herself at the end of season 5.
And that may be true, but I Michelle Trachtenberg just the way that and it's not even her fault. I understand that now as an adult. I understand. But at the time I was like, everything she does is awful.
Yeah, but if that is true, then I do think that was a good choice to bring that call back to the reason why Buffy sacrificed herself in the first place, and then throwing that line back to remind her, like, to turn it around on Buffy, because now Buffy is the one that has to do the challenge of living and not just existing.
Yeah.
All right, so this one, I think this is the last one that we're going to score out of 10. What do you give Something to Sing About?
I hope it's not the last one because there's still Where Do We Go From Here? But for this one, I think that again in the episode, I would say that this gets a higher rating than if I were listening to it outside of the episode. I'd give this like a strong 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I think musically it's not that great, and again that we do get that um, it, if Sarah Michelle Gellar had a stronger singing voice, I think that the lines about heaven would hit a little bit harder because you can feel the weakness in her voice as she's singing about heaven. But outside of that, I think I would give it another 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then after that, we get the the slight bit of gay panic, which I think is weird in a show that is so gay positive in general. That as soon as Sweet finds out that it was Xander and not Dawn that summoned him, he's like, "No, we're good. I don't want to have a guy queen. I'm out of here."
Yeah, and in my notes, I was like, this is kind of a lame ending, and I I think that it's because of that, the fact that that instead of instead of the consequences still being on the table, they go, ugh, oh God, I guess I'm just gonna leave.
Yeah, I can understand in a way why they did that because in the grand scheme of things, Sweet does not feel like a an extremely even evil demon, even though he did kill at least 2 people. But he's so fun. I think they wanted to potentially leave the door open for him to maybe come back. Like maybe if Buffy did go on for like 10 seasons, they would have had another musical episode in seasons 8 or 9.
Yeah.
So I can understand why, but I do feel like they could have figured out some other way for them to resolve this without this weird gay panic moment.
And I also think that this being kind of the way that people find out that Dawn has been stealing from the magic shop is eh, not the best.
Yeah. Well, in this episode, she says that she found it on the ground. Like she doesn't really admit to stealing. She's like, "Oh, I must have forgotten about it." So it's still another episode or 2 or 3 before they really confront her about her kleptomania. And then we get a couple verses of Sweet before he leaves, and then we get the Where Do We Go From Here, which I mean I wasn't going to rate it because it doesn't feel like a full song because we have a Spike and Buffy, basically walk off in the middle and they're still going on. I do love that they're still singing while the camera and the audience leaves them.
And you do get that final kind of snippet of it during that smooch at the end though, which was why I was like, oh, I really I want to rate it.
uh, but yeah, it's really no, it's them just asking where do we go from here, and I do love that Spike pulls himself out of the song. Like that's just a great little moment for his character. And we have the coda at the end with Buffy and Spike, and I appreciate the fact that as the audience leaves, the last lines that we hear from the song is when the curtains close on a kiss.
Hmm.
And that is how the episode ends up ending, with the kiss between Buffy and Spike, which at this point feels. I'm not. I'm honestly not sure what to think about it, because Buffy has been very resistant at this point. It's hard for me to put myself back in the headspace of this moment without bringing in all the later baggage.
I I benefit from being able to talk with my sister about this episode because we sat and watched it together and we both loved Spike. So so I was able to go, hey, remember at the end of Once More with Feeling when Buffy and Spike uh, are kind of out in the alleyway and the rest of the Scooby Gang is still singing, and then uh, Buffy and Spike kiss, and we had a little bit of a geek out moment because it was the best moment in the world for teenage girls. Best like favorite kiss of the series, uh, tens across the board as far as just finally giving us what we wanted. Uh, but agreed that when you look at where they're going to end up, it's not good.
Mhm. Yeah, it's weird. I don't have a strong memory of how the relationship progresses through season 7. So I know that they end on good terms, but I can't remember exactly how that plays out. I mostly just remember how things go in season 6, which is not
Yeah.
great.
Like shortly after this is the high point of that relationship, and then it goes low, and then it goes much lower, and then it goes to a place that I truly wasn't ever anticipating. But but yeah, they do turn it out in the end fairly well.
Yeah. So, well, you said that you wanted to rate where do we go from here. I know it's, I think the shortest song, well, not counting the mustard and the parking ticket song. This is like the shortest song, I think. But what would you give? Where do we go from here?
So I really like the choreography, and I like the fact that this is one of the only songs that does a good job using harmony and counter melody. So from a musicality perspective, I give this like a strong, like, I'd say 9 out of 10. This is my second favorite song in the entire thing. So I really enjoy a lot of it. And while I don't think that Buffy and Spike's songs really mesh super well in that uh, in that bit of intertwining interaction, I do appreciate the effort. So 9 out of 10 for me.
All right. And um, I don't know. I feel like I just don't have enough of an opinion on it to rate it, but yeah, I'll accept your 9 out of 10, and I will say I do think that this is the only part, the only song where where our opinions really diverged that
Yeah.
much. So yeah, that is the end of this episode. Kiss the End, a 20th century television production, and curtains, and the monster at the end going grr arg in a very operatic way, which I forget exactly how it goes because I didn't actually watch all the way through to the mutant enemy logo this time around.
Yeah. I don't think I even knew that. I think I just usually skipped that.
Yeah, it's one that I usually always like it, but this was 1 o'clock in the morning, so I'm like, as soon as the curtains are, I'm like, okay, it's late even for me. I'm a kind of a night owl, but this is a little bit too late.
Yeah.
So I guess I I know we're running even longer than I I thought we would, but there is so much to talk about. But I did want to ask you before we close up here. I know that you are heavily involved in Rocky Horror Picture Show, screenings, and you said that you also do Once More with Feeling screenings. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you got started with those and like how often those pop up and how they go?
Yeah. So, um, so in the Rocky Horror community, there are others like movies that people sometimes do the Rocky Horror treatment to, and one of them is Dr. Horrible's Sing Along blog. Another
Mhm.
one is Repo the Genetic Opera, but then up in like Rhode Island, there's a group that does shadow casts of Once More with Feeling, and I've seen them do this a couple of times at conventions, and it's just a bunch of people who love this so much that they dress up like the characters and pantomime it just like they would with Rocky.
Mhm.
And I think that that's just really really fun. There are a couple of callbacks, but mostly it's just a sing along, and it's just people watching this and going, "Oh, I remember watching this. I thought this was great." So um, that's really my experience of it. I think that it's just very interesting that this is so well known and so well loved that there are people out there that kind of take it as a standalone musical and will present it for people.
Yeah, I do think that it holds up pretty well as a standalone episode, even though there is like a lot of backstory to a lot of the songs that and like context that you kind of need to know. But I do think that for the most part, the songs and the episode does hold up as a standalone viewing, and it's so great and so fun. And I think it would be interesting if I ever manage to catch one of those. If one ever pops up in the Atlanta area, I would definitely strongly consider going to it.
Absolutely. And I think that it's likely that if there's ever like a convention down there, I think your local cast is called Lips Down on Dixie.
Mhm.
And if they ever throw a convention, I wouldn't be surprised if this was one of the things that they brought to the table.
Wow, I will keep an eye out for that. But I would like to thank you for talking to me with today. Blah, 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 blah. I'd like to thank you for talking with me today. It's been a lot of fun talking about this episode. I had a feeling we would go long, and we went even longer, slightly longer than I even anticipated for us to go long. But it's been a lot of fun talking with you about Buffy and about Once More with Feeling. And hopefully, I'll have you back sometime in the future. And
Yeah.
why don't you go ahead and let everybody know about Rocky Horror Minute and where else they can find you online?
Thank you. Yeah, so my podcast is Rocky Horror Minute, and we break down the Rocky Horror Picture Show in excruciating detail, 1 minute at a time. You can find us anywhere you find your podcasts or at rockyhorrorminute.com.
All right, and as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me at flightstitesandmovienights.com. You can find me on Twitter, where I'm at Bubbawheat. You can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can join that to discuss episodes as they come out, or have discussions about time loop movies or TV shows in general. And we will be back with a few more of these bonus episodes. So until next time, grr.
Arg.
Where do you live?
Numbing Hand.
Word and weird.
Essence of slug. Mummy hand.
Word and weird.
Essence of slug. Mummy hand.
Word and weird.